In our breakout, we studied Jo Little's work on violence, the body, and the spaces of intimate war that she wrote in 2020. This paper was hugely interesting, opening our eyes to many different issues in society that aren't regularly discussed or recognised. She created the link between space and place and gender relations, calling upon the changes that the rural environment brings into these relationships, which widely go unnoticed. A hugely important point, and we found the interview process very eye-opening. However, we began our interview process by asking Jo Little questions that were more about how she began to develop an interest in gender relations and look further into these more general questions before we've dived into the paper itself. Through asking Jo Little about what human geography meant to her, we can see how her writing based on gender has been inspired. She speaks on her interest in people's everyday lives, identities, and how they experience space, along with how spatial processes create different experiences between people. From her research, we can see how she has been drawn to write about people's different experiences. This links well to gender, as Little states it is something which has been used within society to create differences. Gender and human geography. Through asking Little about the importance of developments in gender relations within geography and how this has helped society, Little suggested that human geography has helped move the attention towards gendered geographies. These recognitions stemmed from the fact that many realised, as Gregory 2009 states, that gender is a powerful means of naturalising difference. Jo Little also suggests this and explained it was a key difference that people identified in the 1980s. With the help of human geography within this changing world, the attention has been focused back to gendered divisions within society, a division that has been recognised more and more, helping to aid and bring about change. Raising awareness to the pockets of society where there is still significant inequality based on gender.
Feminist geography has now permeated most corners of the discipline and has become a force that cannot be ignored in accounts of the contemporary geographical knowledge. However, in the first wave of feminist geography, from the 1970s onward, it only focused on giving visibility to women in general, which excluded the important factors such as race, income, and sexuality. Developments in the 1980s as part of the cultural turn meant that further strands of feminist geographies were emerging, such as socialist feminist geographies. Today, in the wake of the internet revolution, gender geography has certainly progressed across the globe, but more so in the Western society. The third wave of geography recognises that place perception for women varies completely on race, sexuality, and class. This is suggested by Linda McDowell, who states that the positionings of a white British woman are not the same as those of women from different ethnic or class backgrounds. Human geography in the changing world has aided the developments and research towards domestic violence and how experiences differ in this ever-changing society. The key topic of gender touches every aspect within human geography, and with vital research that has been conducted, the knowledge and awareness of key problems relating to gender within society are being raised and recognised. Studies on domestic violence have enabled an increasing worldwide awareness on the key issues within gender relations, allowing us to educate and propose changes. The increasing awareness allows new viewpoints to arise from different examples and experiences within society. The inequalities can therefore be exposed. For example, as Jo Little explained, that a key interest in human geography was how her different experiences for people can occur due to spatial patterns. A vital aspect to recall is about how gender relations can differ based on these spatial patterns as they allow inequalities to develop. These inequalities in development related to domestic violence have become more clear as research is continued within human geography. Therefore, in this changing world, human geography is creating more awareness about the gender inequalities that can develop into domestic violence. Despite the increasing awareness, some situations are still very much unchanged, which is an area which Jo Little investigates. A key idea that Little explained to us was that the importance of talking about these domestic violence issues now today. As awareness grows, more people are being educated, and there is more understanding about domestic violence, with people understanding now that just domestic abuse doesn't always come in the form of violence. Looking more into Jo Little's work, she has studied how spaces affect gender relations and within the gender, place, and culture. We understand that the roles within the rural community is hugely uneven between genders. They go on to explain that these unequal relations affect the farming industry in these areas, but hugely affect communities. The effect that these patriarchal gender relations have within the community allow the divisions of labour to be created, due to women expected to conform to the traditional practices which are now outdated, where they nurture and perform domestic work. Following on from this, the factors that Little and Pinelli describe of the rural dynamics within relationships in the rural space and the ways women are expected to have a domestic lifestyle links perfectly to Rose's analysis of space. She states one of the most oppressive aspects of everyday spaces is the division between public space and private space. Developing from Jo Little's work focusing on domestic violence in rural areas, we also questioned how the geography of a rural space can influence the prevalence of domestic violence. Lisa Pruitt notes that the geographical location of rural areas, and thus their isolated characteristics, does constrain rural victims more so than urban. This is because services are further away, such as hospitals or mental health facilities, and similarly, responding to crime takes longer. The structure of houses and the housing density in rural areas is also clearly very different from the urban, and thus, as most houses in rural areas tend to be detached, this can also foster greater expectations of privacy and create a higher level of anonymity to the abuser and victims. Whilst privacy is a large factor in influencing the higher prevalence of domestic violence, also in rural areas there tends to be a higher sense of community in the area. It is common that this can also inhibit the victim's ability to speak or get help, as it affects the couple's image to the community. This lack of anonymity and the interpersonal familiarity that marks the rural areas is also a reason for low reporting rates of domestic violence. Typically, rural communities are slower to alter their traditions and do retain more old-fashioned norms, as the community is exposed less with changes with regard to gender roles, for example, thus again suggesting why there is more difficulty to speak up and report violence.
In our changing world, new regions of space are being made accessible. Cyberspace is an area where people are able to express themselves to large groups of others and create a virtual identity where they are able to present themselves in more ways than they are able to in person. As this space expands, there is greater potential for representation of people across various sites and social medias. While providing a space for people to communicate and convey who they are, there is often a feeling of needing to fit in within society. However, there is a growing change of attitude of acceptance in who you are and being proud of your identity. Rose et al. Highlight the relationship between social media and gender in several different ways. As social media has grown, gender stereotypes have been developed and given meaning to what it means to identify as a certain gender. For example, male pictures tend to be seen as more active, dominant, and independent, while the traits prominent in female users include attractive and dependent. Representation of your gender can be interpreted as a performance of yourself, with societal expectations being shaped by individuals and their interactions in communication loops.
In conclusion, the role of human geography in the changing world is to help create more awareness of these unequal gender roles, which can help people in positions of power to create potential interventions, which could help these unequal gender roles developing to a stage where issues such as domestic violence can occur. These issues are exacerbated by the rural-urban divide, as in rural areas, gender roles are far more traditional. However, this divide is being mitigated by the increase in social media, as women are able to portray themselves in ways in which they haven't been able to before, further helping to break down these traditional gender roles.